Welcome to the fascinating journey through the story of one of the most enigmatic and controversial characters in the scriptures, Balaam. Get ready for an adventure filled with mysteries and surprising revelations. Our tale begins in ancient lands, in a time when faith and prophecy guided the destinies of peoples. Balaam, the prophet whose story we will unveil, was known by many as a man of great power and wisdom. He was not an Israelite, but his reputation as a seer and prophet reached far and wide, crossing borders and being whispered in respectful and fearful conversations. Balaam's fame was no accident. His ability to hear the voice of the gods and convey their messages made him a respected and feared figure. It was said that everything Balaam blessed prospered, and everything he cursed perished. His connection to the divine was unquestionable, and many sought his counsel and interventions. But who was Balaam really? Was he a true servant of the Most High or a man driven by self-interest and dark ambitions? This is the question that will guide us through this story as we explore the actions and motivations of this singular prophet. So, sit back comfortably, open your minds and hearts, and prepare to discover the fascinating and dark story of Balaam, the prophet whose voice echoed both blessings and curses. Our journey is just beginning. As the Israelites advanced on their journey through the desert, their presence aroused unease and fear among the neighboring nations. Among these nations was Moab, ruled by King Balak. He watched with growing concern the strength and numbers of the Israelites, fearing that his people would be destroyed or subjugated by this seemingly invincible army. In his desperation, Balak sought an unusual solution. He knew that a direct battle against the Israelites would be suicidal. So, he decided to resort to supernatural means to secure victory. It was at this moment of anguish that the name of Balaam arose. The prophet's reputation as a powerful intermediary between the world of men and the world of gods was well known. Balak believed that if Balaam could curse the Israelites, the balance of power would tilt in Moab's favor. Thus, Balak sent important messengers laden with riches and promises to the distant land where Balaam resided. The messengers brought valuable gifts and a clear message: "Come to Moab and curse this people who threaten us." When the emissaries arrived at Balaam's house, the atmosphere was tense. They presented their gifts and conveyed King Balak's offer. Balaam's eyes sparkled at the sight of the riches, but he knew he couldn't act on his own. His fame was due to his ability to hear the gods, and he needed to consult the Most High before making any decision. Balaam asked the messengers to stay the night so he could seek divine guidance. During the night, Balaam withdrew to a solitary place where he communicated with the Most High. The response was clear and definitive: "Do not go with them. Do not curse these people, for they are blessed." The next morning, Balaam returned to the messengers with God's message. He explained that he could not go with them nor curse the Israelites, for they were blessed by the Most High. The frustrated messengers returned to Moab to deliver the news to Balak. But this would not be the last time the Moabites would try to obtain the prophet's services. Balak's determination and the temptation of riches for Balaam set the stage for even more intriguing and twist-filled events. After the departure of Moab's messengers, Balaam returned to his daily life but could not ignore the growing unease in his heart. The words of the Most High were clear, but the temptation of riches and the honor offered by Balak continued to linger in his mind. Meanwhile, in Moab, Balaam's negative response was not well received. King Balak, determined to protect his kingdom at any cost, decided to send another group of even more noble and influential emissaries with even more generous offers. These new messengers arrived at Balaam's house, bringing promises of great honors and unimaginable riches if he agreed to curse the Israelites. Seeing the increased offers and hearing the new promises, Balaam was tempted once again. But he knew the decision was not in his hands. He asked the messengers to stay the night while he sought the Most High's guidance once more. That night, Balaam withdrew to pray, seeking a divine answer. The Most High responded, reaffirming his will. "If these men have come to call you, rise and go with them, but do only what I tell you." In the morning, Balaam informed the messengers that he would accompany them, but under the strict condition of following only the instructions of the Most High. The messengers were relieved and left with Balaam, bringing with them the hope that they would finally get the help needed to defeat the Israelites. However, Balaam's journey would not be simple. The prophet was about to face challenges that would test his obedience and faithfulness to the Most High in ways he could never have imagined. The riches and honors that awaited him in Moab were great, but the price of disobedience to God would be even greater. Balaam mounted his donkey and followed the emissaries, unaware that his path would be intercepted by a celestial messenger who would change the course of his journey and possibly his life. The news of Balaam's arrival in Moab spread quickly. King Balak of Moab was relieved to know that the renowned prophet would finally respond to his call. The promise of great riches and honors seemed to be coming true. Balak was eager to meet Balaam and see the prophet's power in action against the feared Israelites. However, Balak knew he needed to ensure Balaam's commitment. He received the prophet with great pomp and ceremony, offering him a luxurious banquet and more valuable gifts. The king reiterated the gravity of the situation and the urgency of his request. "Please curse these people, for they are more powerful than us. Perhaps then we can defeat them and drive them out of our land." Balaam, aware of the delicate position he was in, reiterated that he could only speak the words given by the Most High. He remained firm despite the temptations, reminding Balak that, although he was present, he could not act on his own. The prophet asked for more time to seek divine guidance. That night, Balaam withdrew to a solitary place, away from the palace's hustle and bustle. He prayed to the Most High, seeking clarity and instructions. The Most High responded, instructing Balaam to follow the men of Balak but with a clear condition. He should speak only what the Most High ordered. The next morning, Balaam informed Balak of the divine conditions. The king, though impatient, agreed to the imposed restrictions, believing that the prophet's presence and reputation would guarantee the curse on the Israelites. Balak prepared altars and sacrifices, trying to please the gods and ensure the success of Balaam's mission. Balaam, for his part, felt the weight of responsibility and temptation. The riches and honors offered were tempting, but the divine order was clear. He knew that disobeying the Most High would bring terrible consequences. So he remained vigilant, aware that his journey was just beginning and that the challenges to his faith and integrity were far from over. The tension mounted as Balak and Balaam prepared for the decisive moment. What did the future hold for the prophet? Would he be able to resist the temptations and remain faithful to the Most High? These questions hung in the air as the night advanced and the anticipation grew. At dawn, Balaam felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He knew that the mission he was about to embark on was delicate and loaded with profound spiritual implications. With his eyes on the horizon, he mounted his faithful donkey, ready to follow Balak's emissaries toward the spiritual battleground that awaited him. The journey to the place where the Israelites were camped was long and winding, and as Balaam traveled, he reflected on the order of the Most High. God had permitted him to go, but with a clear instruction: "Speak only what I tell you." This condition echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the fine line between obedience and transgression. As Balaam continued on his journey, something extraordinary began to happen. An angel of the Lord, invisible to human eyes, appeared on the path, wielding a sword. Balaam's donkey, however, saw the angel and turned off the road into a field. Balaam, not understanding the reason for the detour, beat the donkey to get it back on the path. This incident repeated twice more. The second time, the donkey pressed Balaam's foot against a wall as it tried to avoid the angel. And the third time, the donkey, with no other option, lay down on the path, refusing to move. Each time, Balaam reacted with increasing frustration and violence against the animal. Then, something even more surprising happened. God opened the donkey's mouth, and she spoke to Balaam. "What have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times?" Balaam, surprised but not immediately recognizing the uniqueness of the situation, responded, "You have made a fool of me. If only I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now." The donkey replied, "Am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden, to this day? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you?" Balaam acknowledged that she had not. Then God opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his drawn sword. The angel rebuked Balaam for beating the donkey and explained that if the donkey had not turned away, he would have killed Balaam and spared the animal. Balaam, deeply repentant and fearful, bowed down and offered to return if it was displeasing to God. But the angel instructed Balaam to continue with the men, reiterating that he should speak only the words God gave him. So, with a heavy heart and a focused mind on his mission, Balaam continued his journey. The experience with the angel was a solemn reminder of God's power and presence, and a warning that Balaam's words and actions would be closely watched. As Balaam continued his journey, the experience with the angel of the Lord still echoed in his mind. The solemn warning had deepened his understanding of the seriousness of his mission. Each step he took was now imbued with a renewed awareness of the divine presence and the grave consequences of his actions. Crossing valleys and mountains, Balaam finally sighted the Moabite camp. King Balak, accompanied by his nobles and advisors, anxiously awaited the prophet's arrival. When Balaam and his entourage approached, Balak ran to meet them. The king's anxiety was palpable. He had placed all his hopes in Balaam's power to save his people from the Israelite threat. "Why did you not come to me at once when I summoned you? Am I not able to reward you?" Balak asked, a mix of relief and impatience in his voice. Balaam, dismounting his donkey, responded calmly, "Well, I have come to you now, but I can't say whatever I please. I must speak only what God puts in my mouth." With this declaration, Balak led Balaam to a high place where they could see part of the Israelite camp. There, Balak had prepared 7 altars and offered a bull and a ram on each altar, seeking to secure divine favor. Following the Most High's guidance, Balaam asked Balak to wait beside the burnt offerings while he went aside to meet with God. In a solitary place, Balaam sought the presence of the Most High again, and God came to him, putting words in the prophet's mouth. Balaam returned to Balak and, in a moment of great expectation, began to deliver the divine message. But to Balak's surprise and frustration, the words that came out of Balaam's mouth were not curses but blessings for Israel. "How can I curse those whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce those whom the Lord has not denounced? From the rocky peaks, I see them. From the heights, I view them. I see a people who live apart and do not consider themselves one of the nations." Balak's anger was evident. "What have you done to me? I brought you to curse my enemies, but you have done nothing but bless them." Balak insisted that Balaam try again in another location, perhaps with a different view of the Israelites, hoping that the change of perspective would alter the result. But Balaam, aware of the divine order, repeated, "Must I not speak what the Lord puts in my mouth?" The tension grew. Balak was determined to get what he wanted, while Balaam remained caught between the promises of riches and honors from a desperate king and the uncompromising order of the Most High. Each step of this complex spiritual dance was full of uncertainties, and Balaam's next moves would be crucial. Balaam's journey was far from ordinary. After meeting the angel of the Lord, he continued to the next location designated by Balak. But before moving forward to Balak's next attempt, it is important to reflect on one of the most singular and revealing episodes of this narrative, the speaking of the donkey. As Balaam traveled with Balak's messengers, he rode his faithful donkey. It was a clear and calm morning, but an invisible tension filled the air. Unknown to Balaam, an angel of the Lord was standing in the road, blocking his path with a drawn sword. The donkey, however, saw the angel. Frightened, the donkey turned off the road and went into a field. Balaam, unaware of the reason for the detour, beat the donkey to get it back on the road. Further on, in a narrow path between 2 walls, the angel appeared again. The donkey tried to avoid the angel, pressing Balaam's foot against the wall. In pain and frustration, Balaam beat the donkey a second time. The third time was in a narrow place where the donkey could not turn either to the right or the left. Seeing the angel of the Lord ahead, the donkey lay down under Balaam, refusing to move. Balaam, now furious, beat the donkey with his staff. Then something extraordinary happened. God opened the donkey's mouth, and she said to Balaam, What have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times? Balaam, surprised but not immediately recognizing the uniqueness of the situation, responded, "You have made a fool of me. If only I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now." The donkey, with unexpected wisdom, replied, "Am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden? To this day, have I been in the habit of doing this to you?" Balaam acknowledged that she had not. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his drawn sword. The angel asked him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? I have come here to oppose you because your path is a reckless one before me. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If it had not turned away, I would certainly have killed you by now, but I would have spared it." Balaam bowed low and fell face down. "I have sinned," he said. "I did not realize you were standing in the road to oppose me. Now if you are displeased, I will go back." The angel of the Lord told Balaam to go with the men but to speak only what he tells him. So Balaam went with Balak's officials. With a new understanding of divine vigilance over him and a vivid reminder of God's sovereignty, Balaam continued his journey. After the supernatural encounter with the angel of the Lord, Balaam continued his journey with a deep sense of humility and reverence. The lesson learned through the donkey had reinforced the importance of strictly obeying the Most High's orders. Thus, he headed to meet Balak, knowing that the task ahead would not be simple. Upon arrival, Balak was impatient and hopeful. The sight of Balaam dismounting his donkey brought a glimmer of relief to the Moabite king. He immediately led Balaam to a high place where they could see part of the Israelite camp. Balak prepared 7 altars and offered a bull and a ram on each one, hoping these sacrifices would help secure divine favor. Balaam, staying true to his mission, asked Balak to wait beside the offerings while he withdrew to meet with God. In a solitary place, Balaam prostrated himself and sought divine guidance. The Most High came to Balaam and put words in his mouth, instructing him on what to say. With a heavy heart, Balaam returned to Balak and the Moabite nobles. When Balak expected to hear words of curse against the Israelites, Balaam lifted his voice and pronounced God's message, which, to Balak's surprise and frustration, was a blessing. "How can I curse those whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce those whom the Lord has not denounced? From the rocky peaks, I see them. From the heights, I view them. I see a people who live apart and do not consider themselves one of the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob or number even a fourth of Israel? Let me die the death of the righteous, and may my final end be like theirs." Balak's expression turned to disbelief and anger. "What have you done to me?" he exclaimed. "I brought you to curse my enemies, but you have done nothing but bless them." Balaam, maintaining his calm and firmness, replied, "Must I not speak what the Lord puts in my mouth?" Desperate and determined, Balak was not ready to give up. He led Balaam to another location, once again hoping that a new perspective on the Israelite camp might result in a curse. More altars were prepared, and new sacrifices were offered. Balaam withdrew once more to seek divine guidance, and again, God put words in his mouth. When Balaam returned, the message was clear and unequivocal. "Arise, Balak, and listen. Hear me, son of Zippor. God is not human that he should lie, not a human being that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? I have received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot change it." Balak's anger grew with every word of blessing that came from Balaam's mouth. He felt his hopes being destroyed by the invincible force of the Most High, who protected the Israelites. The frustration of Balak and Balaam's obedience to the divine command created a growing tension. Despite Balak's increasing frustration, he was still not ready to give up. Determined to obtain the curse of the Israelites, Balak took Balaam to a third location, the top of Mount Peor, overlooking the wasteland. Once again, 7 altars were erected, and more sacrifices were offered, hoping that the new perspective on the Israelite camp would finally result in the desired curse. Following the usual procedure, Balaam withdrew to seek divine guidance. This time, however, something different happened. The Spirit of God came upon Balaam, and he did not need to withdraw. Taken by the Spirit, Balaam looked out over Israel's camp, and with a powerful and inspired voice, he began to deliver a new message. Lifting his eyes and hands to the sky, Balaam proclaimed, "The prophecy of Balaam son of Beor, the prophecy of one whose eye sees clearly, the prophecy of one who hears the words of God, who sees a vision from the Almighty, who falls prostrate, and whose eyes are opened. How beautiful are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling places, Israel. Like valleys they spread out, like gardens beside a river, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the waters. Water will flow from their buckets. Their seed will have abundant water. Their king will be greater than Agag. Their kingdom will be exalted." Balaam's words were filled with blessings, promises of prosperity and greatness for Israel. He continued, "God brought them out of Egypt. They have the strength of a wild ox. There is no divination against Jacob, no evil omens against Israel. It will now be said of Jacob and of Israel, 'See what God has done.'" Hearing these words, Balak could no longer contain his anger. Neither curse them at all nor bless them at all. Balak said to Balaam. Balaam answered, "Did I not tell you I must do whatever the Lord says?" Balak, defeated and furious, took Balaam to another place, but the divine message remained unchanged. Each attempt resulted in more blessings for Israel. Balaam's final blessing not only reaffirmed Israel's prosperity, but also proclaimed the downfall of the enemies of God's people. Amalek was first among the nations, but their end will be utter destruction. Alas, who can live when God does this? Ships will come from the shores of Kittim. They will subdue Ashur and Eber, but they too will come to ruin. So Balak gave up, recognizing that nothing could change the destiny God had established for Israel. Balaam's journey culminated in a solemn recognition of the sovereignty and immutability of the divine will. After Balaam's final blessing, Balak's frustration reached its peak. The king of Moab had invested time, resources, and hopes in the belief that Balaam could curse the Israelites and weaken the people he so feared. However, each attempt resulted in even more powerful blessings for the Israelites. Balak's fury was palpable. "Go back to your place," Balak said to Balaam. "I said I would reward you handsomely, but the Lord has kept you from being rewarded." The king was furious because, instead of obtaining the desired curse, he had just witnessed the reaffirmation of the divine promises of prosperity and power for Israel. Balaam, aware of Balak's anger, maintained his calm and resolute posture. He knew he had fulfilled the Lord's command and that his integrity as a prophet depended on his obedience. "Did I not tell the messengers you sent me? Even if Balak gave me all the silver and gold in his palace, I could not do anything of my own accord, good or bad, to go beyond the command of the Lord, and I must say only what the Lord says?" Even in the face of the king's frustration and anger, Balaam reiterated his faithfulness to the Most High, reminding Balak of the limitations of his own power before the divine will. With his mission officially concluded, Balaam prepared to return to his land. However, before leaving, he offered Balak a shrewd and dark piece of advice. Although Balaam could not curse the Israelites directly, he knew how to make them fall into disgrace before God. "The Lord protects and blesses Israel," he said, "but if you make them sin against their God, they will lose that protection." This advice, a mix of cunning and malevolence, would form the basis for Balak's strategy against the Israelites. Balaam suggested that Moabite women be sent to seduce the Israelite men, leading them to worship foreign gods and engage in immoral practices. If the Israelites fell into this trap, they would provoke the wrath of the Most High against themselves. Seeing a new opportunity, Balak readily accepted Balaam's advice. He sent Moabite women to the Israelite camp, luring them with feasts and sacrifices to the gods of Moab. Unfortunately, many Israelites succumbed to the temptation, worshipping Baal Peor and provoking God's wrath. As a result, a devastating plague struck the people of Israel, causing great suffering and death. Although Balaam was prevented from directly cursing Israel, his cunning resulted in great harm to the chosen people. His story serves as a grim warning about the consequences of seeking personal desires at the expense of obedience to the divine will. After Balaam's cunning advice, Balak's sinister strategy began to be implemented. The Moabite and Midianite women, with their beauty and charm, were sent to the Israelite camp. They seduced the men of Israel, inviting them to participate in their feasts and rituals dedicated to Baal Peor, a pagan god. The Israelites, yielding to temptations, began to involve themselves with these women and participate in idolatrous sacrifices. They ate the sacrifices offered to idols and bowed down before foreign gods. This apostasy, this betrayal of the covenant with the Most High, had devastating consequences. God's wrath was kindled against Israel because of their unfaithfulness. The Most High ordered Moses to take drastic measures to purify the people. Take all the leaders of these people, kill them and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel. The Lord ordered Moses. A deadly plague was sent among the people, causing great suffering and death. In the midst of the chaos, a particularly grave incident caught the attention of Moses and the entire congregation. An Israelite named Zimri brought a Midianite woman, Cosbi, into his camp, in blatant disrespect for Moses' orders and the national mourning for the plague. Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, saw the act and, zealous for God's honor, took a spear in his hand and followed the couple into the tent. There, Phinehas drove the spear through both of them, halting the plague that had killed 24,000 Israelites. Phinehas' act was recognized by God as an act of justice, and the plague ceased. This episode of downfall and redemption had a profound impact on the people of Israel. They learned, in a painful way, about the dangers of idolatry and unfaithfulness. Although Balaam's advice was not a direct curse, it caused great damage, showing that internal corruption can be as destructive as external threats. The story of the events at Baal Peor serves as a grim reminder of the need for faithfulness and spiritual vigilance. The Israelites understood that, to remain under the protection and blessing of the Most High, they needed to resist temptations and stay firm in their covenant with God. Time passed after the disaster at Baal Peor, but the memory of the tragedies caused by the Israelites' betrayal was not forgotten. Moses and the leaders of Israel were determined to eliminate all influences that had led the people to sin and disobedience. Among these influences was Balaam, whose cunning had caused great harm to God's people. The Israelites prepared for a new military campaign, this time against the Midianites, who had been complicit in Israel's corruption. The Lord ordered Moses, "Take vengeance on the Midianites for the Israelites. After that, you will be gathered to your people." Moses summoned an army and sent them against the Midianites with clear instructions to destroy all the men, women, and children involved in the betrayal. During the battle, the Israelites defeated the Midianites and executed complete vengeance. Among the dead was Balaam, the prophet who, despite his power and renown, had fallen from grace due to his greed and disobedience to the Most High. Balaam had been rewarded by Balak for his treacherous counsel, but in the end, he did not escape God's judgment. Balaam's death was a moment of divine justice. The prophet who had tried to manipulate God's will and corrupt the chosen people met his final fate at the hands of the same Israelites he had tried to curse and corrupt. His tragic end serves as a grim reminder of the consequences of straying from truth and integrity, seeking personal gains at the cost of obedience to God. With the fall of the Midianites and Balaam's execution, Israel finally cleansed itself of the corrupting influence that had led so many to death. The lesson learned was deep and lasting. Faithfulness to the Lord and rejection of worldly temptations are essential for divine protection and blessing. The Israelites continued their journey, aware of the bitter lessons learned and determined to remain faithful to their covenant with God. Balaam's story, with all its ups and downs, temptations and betrayals, stood as an eternal warning about the dangers of disobedience and corruption. Balaam's story is a rich and complex narrative, full of deep lessons about faith, obedience, and the pitfalls of greed. Although the prophet was a figure of great renown and power, his downfall teaches us the importance of staying faithful to God's will and the dangers of being swayed by worldly temptations. After Balaam's death and the purification of the Israelite camp, the people of Israel continued their journey toward the Promised Land with renewed determination to follow God's commandments. The tragedy of Peor and the deaths of thousands served as a grim reminder of what happens when one strays from the path of righteousness. Balaam's legacy is twofold. On one hand, he is remembered as a prophet who, in crucial moments, faithfully heard and conveyed God's word, blessing Israel when instructed to do so. His blessings were words of power and promise, reinforcing the covenant between God and his chosen people. On the other hand, Balaam is also remembered for his moral downfall. His greed and willingness to compromise his principles for the riches and honors offered by Balak led him to give pernicious advice that resulted in Israel's apostasy and the consequent plague. This aspect of his story serves as an eternal warning against the temptation to place personal gains above obedience to God. Balaam's story is frequently referenced in later writings, both in Jewish and Christian traditions, as an example of a false prophet and the corruption that can arise when seeking material rewards above spiritual faithfulness. Balaam's condemnation for his betrayal is clear, and his final fate is a testament to the severe consequences that accompany disobedience and treachery. For the Israelites, Balaam's story became an important part of their spiritual heritage, a constant reminder of the need to remain faithful and vigilant. Through generations, the teachings derived from this story helped shape the collective understanding of justice, obedience, and the relationship with the divine. Reflecting on Balaam's story, we are called to examine our own lives, seeking to identify and resist the temptations that can lead us astray from the path of righteousness. Faithfulness to the Most High and rejection of the world's seductions are eternal lessons we find in this fascinating and dark story.